What is China's five-year plan saying about the direction of the world's second largest economy, and how can investors profit? Here to join us with his analysis is Brendan Ahern of KraneShares. Brendan, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jessica.
So Brendan, let's get started. The Central Committee, which is part of the Communist Party, recently met to lay out its roadmap for the next 5 years. And they do this periodically. It really gives us a sense of sort of where the Chinese economy is going and how other people can get in on the game. So first of all, what did we learn from that 5-year plan?
So the 14th five-year plan is going to focus on a number of themes. In particular, I think for us as investors, it's going to be about domestic consumption, that diminishing their reliance on foreign economies. The gearing toward export-driven manufacturing has been declining for a decade, but we're also going to see electric vehicles, clean energy, non-fossil fuels, healthcare, and broad technology. Within technology, 5G, data, cloud, AI are really themes that are very, very important for China over the course of the next 5 years.
Any surprises? I don't hear any there in that list, but are there any parts of technology investment that China plans to make that you didn't expect?
Well, I think semiconductors that we've seen, U.S. Restrictions on buying technology from Chinese company means that they're going to have to build their own. And I think the importance that from an investor's perspective is we're talking about billions, tens of billions of dollars going to support those specified industries. And as investors, this isn't like a poker tell. I mean, they're literally telling us exactly where we want to position ourselves. And our founder, Jonathan Crane, when he lived in China, when the new 5-year plan comes out, people would switch jobs, because if you're in a sector of the economy not included, guess what? It's not going to get support, and people would literally quit their jobs and switch companies, because you want to be on the same side of the table as these policies.
So I think one of the things that's interesting about this, right, is that this really tells us that the future for investors is green. It is not coal, it is not oil, it is not maybe natural gas, maybe a little bit as a bridge fuel. But if the future is green, what is the best way for investors to go green?
Well, I mean, self-servingly and highly biased, we at KraneShares do have a China clean energy ETF. I think people would be shocked at the performance, that when we think of China, we think of pollution, but there is a recognition that the environmental consequence of manufacturing, that it needs to be addressed. And so over the last 5 years, they've been doing that, but now they've come out and said, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. And so wind, solar, electric vehicles are an area that we do capture in the KraneShares China Clean Energy ETF. So I think, we definitely support, there's policy support for the companies within that ETF.
One thing I think it's important to point out is that these 5-year plans are aspirational, even though they do put money behind them. You might argue they're less aspirational than American political plans of the same nature. But isn't it fair to say that it's not a done deal, that 2050, they're not going to be carbon neutral necessarily?
Yeah, it's a great point, Jessica, that, there are rivalries within the Chinese government. And if within these losers, some of those some of those coal companies are important companies, and they're going to lobby, just as we have a lobbying system to try to keep this from happening. So, certainly they are aspirational. I would focus on where investment dollars, if it's R&D, policy support, subsidies, that really does flow through to the bottom line of winning sectors and winning companies. And additionally, there are societal goals, aspirations, literacy rates, urbanization rates. We as investors are very focused on the economic consequence, but at the same time, there are other aspects. What is interesting is they do have some level of accountability, where every year they kind of check in and say, how is the plan coming along? And they try to address some of these shortcomings on an annual basis and kind of really hold feet to the fire there. But without a doubt, I would agree, Jessica, that there's an aspirational element, just as, every government has kind of aspirations, but when rubber doesn't necessarily hit the road always.
How does the push in China towards green energy impact the other stock markets in terms of the investment and the possibility for an upside in equities that are predominantly green?
Well, one of the things we've heard from the new 5-year plan is that they are going to open this up, that to reach this goal of carbon neutrality is going to take the technology and know-how of foreign companies. And so I think there will be global beneficiaries, European, US companies that are geared to clean energy are going to be beneficiaries. We've seen this in finance where they've said, we're going to open it up, and there's a lot of skepticism, but lo and behold, from the 13th 5-year plan, they said they were going to open up finance. Asset managers, broker dealers, hedge funds, insurance companies have gone into China in a very significant way. And I think you're going to see the same thing happen around clean energy. So there's going to be a global benefit for sure.
So if we think about clean energy, I predominantly think about electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles because I think that's one of the big areas, batteries, that people are moving into. How prevalent is that in China, and how can you invest in that globally?
Well, I think one of the things that when we stay in Beijing, we stay at the JW Marriott, and right next to the JW Marriott, next to the Apple store, is actually a Tesla dealer. Because of subsidies to make them less expensive, it's driving EV growth. And so electric vehicles, I think, are a big part of the solution. At the same time, people are surprised that China is actually the largest producer of clean energy today. The problem is the other half is coal, because coal is cheap and abundant. I think one of the little sleeper trades is that California has a carbon market that if you are a heavy industrial company, you actually have to buy carbon credits. And China's talking about implementing a carbon credit plan like there is in California. And I think, as we have an election coming up here, Kamala Harris is from California, probably very familiar with the California carbon credit market. And maybe you will see that nationalized here in the United States. I think it's a little bit of a sleeper trade. Solar companies, clean energy companies in the US have been rising this year based on the potential. But I think this carbon credit market is a little bit of a sleeper, and we're seeing an indication China might adopt a very similar policy.
Didn't we try that in 2008 and it royally failed in Congress?
We did try from a national level, and so in some ways, California has led national policies in a lot of different kind of societal elements. And I think this carbon credit market is something that there is a East Coast regional market. It's very small. It's kind of the northeastern states. Doesn't get a lot of publicity, but it does exist.
The word for this is cap and trade, right? That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
And so it's really been a more regional program in the United States. But you think potentially if some of the technology that's used in creating it in the US is then used in China, that technology could be a sleeper?
I do, that this cap and trade, as well as this is almost where companies have to go into a market and buy the right to pollute. So this is
How about this? How about if it's all run on blockchain and you can make the trades in Bitcoin or some other kind of digital currency?
China is floating.
Certainly possible, right?
It's certainly, the mobile payment system in China, $49 trillion US in mobile payments in 2019. The PBOC has talked about a digital renminbi.
CBDC.
I think the Ant Group initial public offering is going to highlight the mobile payment nature. So a lot of these trends are almost easier for China to adapt.
Right. And easier because of the star market and other vehicles that China is providing, which is not entirely really allowing foreign investors in yet, but it seems like they're on that trajectory. My mind is buzzing. I hope those of you watching, your mind is also buzzing with some investment ideas. I'm going to wrap it there, Brendan. Thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in.
No, my pleasure. Anytime. Thank you.
You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thanks for watching. I'm Jessica Stone.